Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Philippe Dumas from EJEC. I thank you for joining this webinar. Just for information, we have a record number of people registering to this webinar, more than 200 people. So as we have people connecting from all over the world, we have opportunity to have people from South America, North America, Africa, Europe, and maybe some people from Asia. So we will start in 1 to 2 minutes to allow them to join. Here we are. I was just waiting to be more than 100 people to officially start this webinar, but some are still connecting. So I will just start slowly to present a bit what will be this 2 hours of webinar. First, I want to really thank you for joining us again. So for GEORISK, it's a project supported by the European Commission, started already in November 2018, and we will continue our work until March 2021, so a bit less than 1 year. I want really to start to say that this project is really for you, the geothermal stakeholders, and we are really waiting also your feedback about the work we are doing. So you will see today some first results after 16 months of work, but it's not the end of our work. So we are really here to present you first results and welcoming all your feedback. So I don't know how you are familiar with such a tool. It is GoToWebinar. It's quite an easy tool. So we will have a presentation, and after you have a question, you have 3 possibilities. You raise your hand, I'm able to give you the floor, and you can ask an oral question. You have a question, you can ask a question in the bar questions, and last possibility, you can chat and we can exchange between different experts about the question or discussion you want to learn. So these 3 possibilities allow you to have an interaction during these 2 hours of webinar. To present briefly the agenda, I will have a short presentation about the project, and after we start with the first sessions dealing with understanding the geothermal de-risking, notably the tools we have developed, the risk register and the risk assessment tool, presented by Thomas Le Guenon from the French Geocat Survey BRGM, and also the conditions for schemes according to market maturity, and that will be presented by Ferit Seider from Gecko, a German company. From this works, we will ask also Paul Ramzak, which is a member of the advisory committee for GEORISK. He's coming from RVO, the Dutch agency, and he will give us a bit his view about the work we are doing and the situation maybe in Netherlands to see what is developing there. We could have some discussion if the times allow us to discuss for this session. The second session will be to have an overview of what is the situation in Europe. We start with 2 existing schemes, one in France, one in Switzerland, and feedback about ongoing activities in Poland, Hungary, Turkey, and Greece. This is the session number 2. The third session is to go outside Europe, is a global overview. First, we have a presentation from Virginie Schmidebloch from the French Geothermal Association about the deep geothermal market and the opportunity analysis they are performing. And we give the floor to some important stakeholders from Eline Algrimstodir from the World Bank, Meseret Tekle Mariam Zemdoun from the UNEP in Africa, and Carlos Yorquera from Yorca Energy, which is an expert in geothermal for South America and specifically for Chile. So we will give them also the floor to see a bit what is happening and a global overview. With that presentation of agenda, I will start shortly to present you the geothermal project for those who are not aware about what is this project. But many of you, I assume, are quite familiar with it, so I will not be long anyway. Presentation will be available, so you'll be able
I can't hear you.
digest this information.
This is Mesret. I can't hear you.
And what we will look at as an overview is to say where we are and for the different works. So where it's coming from is coming from that we have a big potential for geothermal, and here we speak about deep geothermal for district heating. In Europe, we say that the resource could help us to cover 25% of the European population for providing them heating and cooling. We have a potential also to develop electricity, maybe with some technical development to be more effective in the future and more cost competitive, but we have also a potential for developing that. What we know is nothing new, is that we have this graph where geothermal, when we start a deep geothermal project, we have this risk component, and we need to de-risk the project. We can de-risk with technical aspect, but here we are looking at the financial coverage of de-risking project. What we have learned in Europe is that you have different schemes for de-risking project, and probably we need to really have the right scheme for the right market maturity. And it's what we will present you. What are the different schemes? What is the risk assessment we do? And what is the market maturity component in the designing of the schemes? Here you can see the list of the partners. So we have some key partners in France, Turkey, Hungary, Poland, Greece, Switzerland, and Germany. And we work all together. All the contact details of these stakeholders, these partners are available on the website of the project. What is the geographical coverage of GEORISK? And it's why you can see today an audience coming from all over the world is that we have some activities in Europe, but not only in Europe, also abroad. We focus in countries having already risk mitigation schemes and countries with ongoing discussion at national level for creating and establishing a scheme. With that, we want to replicate activities all over Europe, also in Africa, with a specific focus on Kenya, in South America, with a specific focus on Latin America, focus on Chile and Mexico, and North America, about Canada. Maybe other countries could be interesting. Let's discuss that in the last session of this webinar. About risk assessment, I will not be too long because there's a presentation dedicated about that just after me by Thomas Le Guenin. So it's how to identify the potential risk, how to assess this risk. And for that, we have developed a tool which is online. And here, really, when I say we need your feedback, it's a first version. And with all your feedback and your comments, we'll be able to develop even a better tool for you. And here is some screenshot of that you can find online, but Thomas will present that in details. The risk mitigation tools, we'll have some presentation, as I say, from the French and the Swiss schemes a bit later. And here, just after Thomas, we'll have Ferid presenting the market maturity component. So also here, I don't go too much into details because it's really what we will discuss in the session 1. An help desk is available notably for public authorities interested to develop de-risking schemes. Also here, we are welcoming all your feedback how we can improve such an help desk. what we aim in our project is not only to develop some tools, but it's implementing such a tools. It's why you see that in the session 2, we discuss with Hungary, Poland, Greece, and Turkey, because we want to see some development in these countries. And we will see what is the situation after 16 months, what is ongoing, and what we expect to see in the next month. Globally, we have some target countries. I was mentioning outside Europe, so Chile, Kenya, Canada, and Mexico. And in Europe, outside our consortium, we would like to cover Denmark, Netherlands, Belgium, Croatia, Serbia, and Slovenia. We will also adapt the tools, look at the framework conditions, do some capacity building. This is the presentation of Virginie also to introduce the session 3 when we go to a global overview. We have a website available. We are doing a media campaign. We publish a lot of reports, brochure. We also organize several events. Today is the second webinar, and just as I was mentioning in the invitation I sent you for this webinar, it should have been a physical meeting during the WGC, the World Geothermal Congress in Reykjavik today, this Wednesday afternoon. Unfortunately, we all are in quarantine and we cannot travel this year. We hope we'll be able to travel next year for WGC, so we have decided to transform this seminar into a webinar. And we hope for the second semester we'll be able to disseminate some results at the IGC Turkey in Izmir, but also at RGO in Nairobi, at GEOLAC in Bogota, and also we expect at the AIGA meeting in Canada, but we all know that the situation is still uncertain. This all for my first presentation about a global overview of the project, and to not lose too much time, I immediately give the floor to Thomas Le Guenin for presenting this risk assessment. Thomas, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, everyone. So hopefully you can see my screen now.
I confirm.
Okay, great. So in this first part, I will talk about the risk register and risk assessment tools. So as you may have guessed, GEORISK is about risk, and without going to the debates of what is a risk, because there is as many definitions as there is opinion on the subject. In GEORISK, we chose the definition, the following definition, that the risk is the possibility of loss for the developers of geothermal projects. And here by loss, I mean mainly financial one, even though that can include environmental loss as well. What's the purpose of our risk assessment? GEORISK is mainly about financial mitigation, but we need a good understanding of the risk before we can mitigate them. Understanding risk or risk assessment means essentially 3 questions. First one is what can go wrong, or what we call risk identification, and we produce a risk register to answer this question. Second and third questions are how likely it is and what are the associated consequences. And this is, in jargon, the risk analysis. Only then can we ask what can we do about it, or in other words, the risk mitigation that we can put in place. So today I'm going to present you the tools that we developed during the first phase of GEORISK. But all of the tools I will show you will be updated this year during the second phase of the project as well. So first, the risk register, answering the question, what can go wrong? So you can, right now, you can access to the GEORISK website, and we have a button here called GEORISK tool. When you click on it, you can access to categories and phases, and it will display tables where we have list of risks. So for instance, here I display the risk due to subsurface uncertainties, what we call also geological risk. It's often reduced to temperature and flow rates, and here it shows that the list is actually bigger than just temperature and flow rate, and there are many events that can happen and that belong to subsurface uncertainties. The overall risk register is now about 50 risks, and we are quite happy about it. We think it's a good it's a good compromise we found between the number of events that's still manageable, but still we think it's quite exhaustive, and so that's we don't miss any important events in this list. The second phase, so like I mentioned, is risk analysis, or answering the question, how likely is it and what are the associated consequences? This depends on essentially at what scope and what level do you look at. At the first country level or even international level, we have some results from a survey that we did, and they are now accessible on the website. Or if you want to answer the question on a project level, we have a spreadsheet also available as a guidance. First, on the country level analysis, we had the results from all GEORISK countries, so displayed for on the right of the picture. We collected more than 60 answers from various stakeholders, and essentially we asked 2 questions for each risk of our list. How likely is it on a scale from 1 to 4, and how damaging is it on a scale from 1 to 4? We summed both scores to give us a risk index, even though we could have merged the scores in different ways. And we have an additional question: how relevant is this risk to you on a scale from 1 to 4? So I give you now an example of the result we got. So this is, for instance, from Hungary, categories of porous reservoirs, which is one of our important target countries in the project. And also here I display only geological risk. We can see, for instance, that the main risk would be this one called D10. D10 is insufficient fluid in the formation. It shows that, again, not only temperature and flow rate are important. And we can even see that this risk, D3, is maybe the lowest in our list. D3 is actually low initial temperature. So here, operators from Hungary believe that temperature is not the biggest deal, and the biggest deal is for them insufficient fluid in the formation. Only when we analyze the risk can we, let's say, move to risk mitigation and to answer the question, what can we do about it? You know, GeoRisk is mainly about insurance, financial mitigation, but we will only seek insurance once we are sure we have done the maximum on the technical level. That's why we provide some list of technical mitigation measures when you click on any risk. So that's accessible through the register or through the risk survey. This is the example for the D10 risk we just saw of insufficient fluid for commercial production, and we have here a list of technical measures. Of course, this list is still a work in progress. The second aspect of risk analysis I wanted to talk about is on a project level instead of country level. So here we developed a spreadsheet that's still, I would say, simple at this stage. It's available on the website or through request. And this is always the same 2 questions. How likely is it? How damaging is it? Here we show how we can fill the spreadsheet for various risks. We get a score, we get some little icons, green, yellow, and red, depending on the level of the risk we get. and then we can display the results like this, so showing you what risks are more important than other and how they and what values they have overall. This is a very short example. Our plan for next year is to give more guidance for performing risk analysis, and also right now we only have qualitative results, and we plan to add quantitative results. For instance, on the slide you can see that with quantitative results we could evaluate each event in terms of probability and maybe percentage of loss, and maybe have more degree of analysis in the results. So our next actions is actually to improve what I just showed you, to update these tools. We of course going to improve the look, but what specifically I have in mind also is to improve the content of the risk sheets, in particular the mitigation measures. Regarding the risk analysis results, maybe improve presentation, in particular letting the user have access to other types of graphs and more readable graphs probably. Like I mentioned, add a quantitative section to the risk analysis spreadsheets, and the possibility to show updates of risk analysis, as this is a very important feature in any risk analysis. And if you have any other suggestions, they are most definitely welcome, and you can drop me an email and let me know. I have finished for this first presentation, so if you have any questions, or maybe we can discuss it at the end of this session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Thomas, for this clear presentation. As I say, I hope we will have some time to present, to allow for some discussion with participants. So after your presentation, now I give the floor to Ferid, and we'll have some feedback from Paul Ramzak, and if time, we'll have an oral discussion with participants. If not, feel free to drop a question or to raise your hand. Ferid, the floor is yours.
So a short feedback. Does anyone see my desktop? Yes, no?
Yes, we can.
So, okay, that's good. We can start then. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Ferid Seydov. I am the person responsible for the leading Working Package 3. Working Package 3 is focusing on studying different risk mitigation schemes, their development throughout the history, and what kind of schemes are available in the different countries across the Europe. More about that you will hear from my colleagues Nicole Lupi and Christian Bossavi. In this presentation, however, I will focus on the proposal for risk mitigation scheme transition in independence of the market maturity of the country. So to make it more effective, I will activate the laser pointer. Now we may go. So the general overview will start our presentation with the market maturity and what is the commercial readiness index levels. Then move to the development of risk mitigation schemes and their transition. I will also introduce the results of the financial simulation that we have made. And the last point will be the help desk tool. With that in mind, we can proceed. So the first stop in our study of the transition was actually identification of what is the market maturity and how do we define it. In order to solve this problem, we have conducted a study and found out that the ARENA, Australian Renewable Energy Agency, has already done such kind of a study, and they have developed the commercial readiness index level. You may see it in a blue column on the right. It is, so to say, continuation of the technological readiness level that is most likely known to most of you. It is used currently in Europe, and it presents a continuation of the development of the technology from the ready technology level to the completely commercially ready, and when the market is completely established and comparable to other markets out there. Now, the original system that has been developed by ARENA was actually for overall renewable energies. It was focusing on mainly solar and wind. We, however, here are trying to adjust it for our purposes, for geothermal purposes. Thereby, we're going to be using this tool for evaluation of the risk mitigation scheme. And here, when we see the adaptation, we have taken indicators that were available from the original tool and adjusted it for evaluation of the risk mitigation scheme and determination of the market maturity in the region, in the country. So as you may see, it is comprised of multiple indicators, such as the regulatory environment responsible for regulation, licensing procedures, stakeholder acceptance, technical performance, which is responsible for how good is the technology ready for the realization of the project. Financial performance, cost, and revenue are self-explanatory. Industry chains and skills, what is available in the market at the moment, market opportunities, and company maturity. Now, in order to evaluate the maturity level of the market, we will be evaluating each of these indicators, then sum up all of them, and each of them is having a different contribution to overall market maturity. In order to make the presentation more effective, I had to cut down several information packages. If you're interested in evaluation of the partner countries, you may always enter our website. There you may find a presentation where the district heating market and power generation market for each country has been presented. Now, the most important value of this tool is to show what kind of indicator in which kind of region is improved or lacking. Knowing that the regulatory environment is lacking, you may actually focus on improving that. But more about that, I will speak in transition criteria. Now, let's move to the risk mitigation scheme structure. So in order to present the structure of the risk mitigation scheme, we have taken several all known risk mitigation schemes like grants, convertible grants, repayable grants, public insurance, and private-public partnership, and private insurance schemes. Now, we are going to allocate them in the market. As you may see here on the right side of this graph, there is a risk level available on the market. And on the bottom side, we have our commercial readiness index, or also known as a market maturity. All the risk mitigation schemes are allocated depending on their support scheme, what are they doing their best, and where they should be implemented to achieve the maximum output. In case where the risk levels are high, we can implement actually only 2 risk mitigation schemes, which are the grants and convertible grants. The difference between 2 is in that in case of the convertible grants, there could be some kind of a necessity for the companies to pay back partially the provided grant. Once the situation in the market is improved, we can move to the third risk mitigation tool. It is a repayable grant, also known as loans. This is the loans that are given to companies by the public agencies, but after successful completion of the project development, or when the project is starting to produce energy, it will have to repay back the grant. This is more effective way of distributing the resources, because by getting reimbursed by the project, the program can maintain itself and last longer. However, to implement that, you need a medium level of risks. Moving forward by developing the market, we can further reduce the risks, and then we can actually achieve the following milestone, where the public insurance schemes can be implemented. The public insurance schemes are self-explanatory as well. Here, no longer the grants are being given by the public agencies, loans also not, but they are providing an insurance of the wells that are being drilled for some kind of a premium, of course. The following after this will be the introduction of public-private partnership. The situation is also much better right now. We are in the range of medium to low risk. The geothermal market is pretty high developed, I would say, and the risks are low, so we can actually introduce the so to say cooperation between public agencies and private companies which are entering the market and trying to create, so to say, a beneficial contract between two parties, in which there is some kind of a ratio of the initial investment cost in the program. The last but not the least is the latest stage of the market development, market maturity. It is being a combination of the latest two commercial readiness index levels, because at the current moment there are not many countries that are reaching this level, and the overall worldwide market maturity levels across many countries is at the beginning stage. But once it is here, the private insurance companies can step up and cover the risk without a necessity of any public funding. Now, before I move forward, there are also two additional mechanisms that are being involved. This is the coverage of overhead costs. That is at the level of 3, the market maturity, there, when the loans are being proposed. The companies are carrying a lot of risk if the well is not successful. So with coverage of overhead costs, we could actually minimize the further risk for the companies and thereby encourage companies to enter the market. The other one is the loan guarantees, where the public agency is encouraging banks to provide loans to the private companies and carrying some kind of a guarantee in case something goes wrong. This is also needed at the level of 4, where no more loans are being provided by the public entities. Lastly, but not the least, there is a private partnership. This is a very rare mechanism available so far only in Germany, but it is very interesting and worthy to note, in which one of the companies, private companies, is taking over the risks and thereby providing for other companies a bit lower level of the risk to encourage them to step up into the market. As an example, it could be a drilling company. This is taking over the risk associated with drilling. thereby providing banks a higher stability in order to allow them to enter the market. Now we will move forward to the transition criteria. As you may see above here, there are 4 transitions here between each of the market maturity levels. Starting with the first one, in order to move from the grants and convertible grants into the loan schemes, there are certain set of criteria that must be fulfilled. These are the criteria here on the left side. On the right side, I've given the specifications or examples. I will fly through them quickly, but you might be interested in this. So do open this. The presentation will be available on our website, so you can also ask Philip to provide the link for this. In order to move from grants to loan schemes, the regulatory environment must be clarified. The agencies must be very strictly divided on who is carrying what kind of responsibility and what must be done by whom. In case of the social acceptance, not much is expected, but one of the main steps is to providing sufficient evidence for stakeholders to increase the trust into the branch. As follows: the technological performance must improve. The background, the geological data must be available. The improvement of understanding of the development costs must be also be introduced. As a result, the project development cost must be not deviating more than 30% from planned value. So adjustment, the increase of predictability of project revenue, stable price and stable contracted partners must be available. And in case of the supplier contact, the market of suppliers must be starting to develop. The market opportunities is at the current level is at the level of experimenting. So there are some different ways for them to make a trial and error, and limited development stage, limited trade of the project in different development stage must be achieved. Case-based business models. So as I said, it's more like a trial and error stage. And lastly, there will be an establishment of companies with minimal experience. This is company maturity, and here the companies will or have to step up into the market and try to develop their skills in order to participate in the market. Following, I will follow with the second transition. It is a transition from the third stage, the fourth, from repayable loans to the insurance, public insurance schemes. Here, the licensing procedures must be furtherly improved, like standardization is required. In case of stakeholder acceptance, the evidence must be increased. There should be some kind of assurance of benefits provided. This, by the way, is referring both to the public population and also the project developers. This is very important indicator, because without it, the encouragement of the parties to enter the market will be greatly hindered. In case of technological performance, one of the most important focus must be the development of models. The better are the models, the less are the risks, the higher is the lifespan of the equipment, and so forth. In case of the financial performance cost and performance revenue, there should be a higher level of predictability of the costs, and there should be also standardized power purchase agreements be present. This is actually going back to regulatory environment. where there could be standardized contracts for power purchase agreements. Supplier chain should start developing specialized products, and in case of market opportunities, there should be regional based models present. The developer, the company maturity should develop the specialization in certain fields of the geothermal industry. For example, some should be specializing in geological survey, the others are providing some kind of equipment, and so forth. So the third one would be one of the final transition methods for most of the countries, because the fourth one is going up ahead. So the third one could be denoted as one of the most important transitions in which the whole market of geothermal industry will be stabilized. These are the criteria to reach that will be following. So the licenses procedures should be standardized even further, the ensuring a long period of licenses. So, and thereby the projects will not suffer from the things like a change in political views and so forth. The taxes and fees must be standardized, and there should be some kind of legal security system introduced. The stakeholder acceptance will be even further encouraged by the achieved successes. The technological performance in this case will be going with the development of the reservoir model. There are not much changes in case of the financial performance, unless the deviations must be less than 15%. The market competition is starting to emerge. There are some kind of companies that are competing with each other in the local market. The business models must be standardized, and increased number of competent developers must be present. The fourth one is, so to say, the latest transition. Currently, it is only interesting for such countries as perhaps France, and to be more specific, only in Paris Basin, where they have a very high market maturity level. So here, the main point is to make the market to be competitive with other developed markets. It will become competitive with such kind of market as the wind, renewable wind, and even other power generation markets. I will shortly introduce you now the results of the simulation that we've done. It has been done by Renewalyzer program. It's a private company program. Here we have simulated different changes throughout introduction of different risk mitigation schemes. So moving from the right to left, we may see that here it's grants, convertible grants, the loans, the insurance schemes, the private-public partnership, and in the end, the private insurance schemes. The result of this simulation has been the introduction of the second tool for evaluation of the market. As you may see here, based on the financial performance of the market, of the project, we may see that the higher is the market maturity, the higher is the ratio of foreign capital, and this could be an indicator of how well is the market actually developing. With this in mind, we can introduce a package of, so to say, a circular package of the evaluation of the market. First will be the market maturity evaluation based on commercial readiness index tool, with the with the evaluation of the indicators. Then, based on this level, we will suggest the suiting risk mitigation scheme, whatever it is, whether it's grants, loans, or public partnership. And in the end, by evaluating the financial performance, we can prove that whether our initial calculations were correct or not, and what kind of adjustments must be made. So lastly, but not least, I would like to also mention one more online tool available on our website. Its content will be, so to say, the whole summary of what you see here. There should be also trainings, a library of information, and also the help desk helpline with frequently asked questions. You may find it on our website. There will be the help desk over here, and there you may see the current results. They're not they're right now at the level of development, but very soon you will be able to read most of the information available and achieved by the project. With this, I would like to summarize my presentation. Thank you for attention. And if you have any questions, please refer to Philippe Dumas. That would be
Thank you very much, Ferid. Indeed, we have received some questions. I'm not sure we are all able to answer them now, but immediately give the floor to Paul Ramsaek to know a bit his reaction as active in a de-risking project for some years. And thank you, Paul, for your availability. So we are listening to you.
Thank you, Philippe. I hope you can hear me all.
Confirm.
So good afternoon, good evening, good morning, or good whatever to everyone of you. My name is Paul Ramsaek. I work in the Netherlands for RVO, which is the Netherlands Enterprise Agency, which is basically the Dutch energy agency part of our Ministry of Economic Affairs. I'm part of the advisory committee of this GEORISK project. And let me share a few thoughts with you and a few reflections on the relevance of the work, and also on, let's say, developments that are going on in the Netherlands. First of all, I think, and this is a crucial kind of element, is we should realize that the risk element in geothermal project is a crucial one to tackle. Geological risk, especially, is a major issue in the development of all geothermal projects. And so you need either a lot of money and deep pockets to be able to take that risk yourself, or you need a solution. And that solution typically would be some way of some kind of risk mitigation scheme. In the Netherlands, we have established about 10 years ago a national risk mitigation scheme for geothermal projects. That's a public scheme run by RVO, run by the government. And that was when we just started actually with geothermal. We already quite soon realized that this is a crucial element, and you really need to put that in place to be able to forward and to propel geothermal projects. Because otherwise you always run into the problems that people that take the initiative, they will have a very hard time getting the money together because no one is willing to take the risk. So to kind of kickstart the market, I would guess that there is a role for the public side, for the government, to make a start and to establish a scheme. So we have been active for 10 years now, and we've seen quite a lot of developments in the Netherlands. And at the moment, actually, we're entering a new phase, I would say, with the Paris agreements, but also with the fact that our national gas production in our largest field will be closed within 2 years. We're looking more and more into alternatives. So for us, the heat transition is really crucial. I think a lot of the discussions regarding renewables in many countries have focused probably too much on electricity. but really on the heating side, there is a lot to gain, and there geothermal can play a major role, I think, in many countries. So having said that, we have quite ambitious goals for 2030 and beyond. And that means that we also are thinking about how to move forward. And again, in all these deliberations, the risk that is kind of associated, the geological risk, especially associated with geothermal, is a crucial one. So that brings us, let's say, to this project, the GEORISK project. And I must say that really we are very happy with this initiative because we think it's a very important initiative. Why is that? I think what we have seen around Europe, at least, is that the countries where geothermal is successful, they all have some kind of solution for this risk mitigation. And so you basically need to think about it. The GEORISK project brings together, let's say, this knowledge and also gives guidance. And we had in the previous presentations, we already had some more theoretical or more detailed guidance, I would say. But more on a practical point, or from a practical point, we have been in quite direct contact with neighboring countries. With other European countries that were interested in this. When we started, we basically looked at France that already had a scheme established for a long time. And we were very grateful that we could learn from them to establish our scheme. Of course, we did some things a little bit different, but it's not the important thing. The important thing is that we really somehow had a kickstart in establishing such a scheme. And in the meantime, we've been able to help out Belgium and the Flanders region, but also we're working with Denmark, for instance, helping them out to bring about a scheme. And we are very happy that I think within also the GEORISK projects, there are other countries that are considering establishing such a scheme, like Hungary, possibly Poland. I heard some positive news about Slovenia, for instance. But I guess in all of your countries, it might be relevant to have such a thing. And then the key issue is, of course, what kind of scheme do we have to put in place? And I think the market maturity approach that was presented just before is a very interesting one. However, one remark I want to share there, I don't think there is like one geothermal market in a country. The geological risk is typically very much related to the knowledge of the subsurface or the geological play where you are aiming at. For instance, in the Paris Basin, there is a lot of knowledge by now, which makes it easier. But also in my country, in the Netherlands, we have areas where there's more and more knowledge about the underground, where we have had successful projects already being realized. And so people can probably take the risk themselves easier. But at the same time, there are new areas where we have less knowledge. And probably for these areas, it will be crucial that there is still some kind of risk mitigation scheme to kind of take the burden and take the big pain that is there upfront away. So to summarize, basically, I think there is a lot of knowledge already around. The GEORISK project will bundle this knowledge. And let me, before I conclude, also inform you, and maybe especially the ones that are working with public authorities, that there is an initiative in Europe called Geothermica, where the governments, national governments of about half of the European countries are working together and exchanging information. And actually, by now, we're already, the USA is also involved in that initiative. And that is a very good platform on the governmental side to have a direct contact with colleagues that are involved in geothermal energy, and also in risk mitigation schemes more in detail. So you can check that out also on the website and through GEORISK or geothermica.eu. You can find more information, and you know, I and other partners from the consortia will be happy to get in touch with you and to answer your questions. So that's it for the moment. If you have any questions, you know, I will be available for the panel discussion as well. Having said that, I wish you all the best in these interesting but probably also difficult times. Stay safe. Wish you all the best and hope to see you soon at some other occasion. Philippe, can you take over?
Thank you, Paul. Yeah, thank you, Paul, for your interesting feedback. I think we have to shorten a bit the Q&A. The people having asked a question right now, we will come back to them via email. Orally, we have one person raising hand. It's Mylène Receveur. I give you the floor. Please mention from where you are coming from, and please be short in your comments or your questions. So Mylène, the floor is yours. But you are self-muted. You have to be unmuted if you want to speak. Mylène Receveur. Well, if not, we have Sis Willem. So Sis, I give you the floor. You're also able to speak now. Sis, we are listening.
Yes. Yeah, my name is Kees Willem. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I live and work in the UK at Heriot-Watt University. I have a question about the mitigation schemes and technology readiness level relation. In the UK, I think the government really follows this approach. So in a very immature market, grants are available, but yet nothing happens. So my question is really, although what advice can you give to the UK? They follow this your relation basically, but still nothing happens. What could be added or what could be wrong? Is that clear?
Yes, thank you for your question. What is wrong probably is not the right information always for the right person. It's why what we try to do in this GEORISK is not one fits for all approach. We should look at UK, also as mentioned, Paul, different maturity, because we see in Cornwall development of some deep geothermal projects. So we have to look at here what is this trend. In the rest of UK, also we see development of some district heating, already one in Southampton, but we see that Stoke-on-Trent City is interesting to the geothermal district heating, and Manchester. So in probably liaising with the main stakeholders, the British Geological Survey, the project developers, and some financial institutions, we should be able to convince the authorities to look at that, establishing a special grant or looking at risk insurance scheme. So I take note of your request, and we will look at that in the GEORISK consortium, and we'll come back to you. I think now it's time to go to the second session. We are a bit late in our program, and I immediately give the floor to Christian Boissavi for presenting the French scheme. Christian, the floor is yours.
Yes. Okay. So you present my slides.
Yes.
So in the first part of this GEORISK project, we have done an intensive work to make the full inventory, if it is possible, of the existing risk mitigation system in the geothermal sector worldwide, I would say. And we'll go directly to my third slide, Philippe. So we have seen that we have a very diversified forms of RMS systems. On the third slide. So Farid already explained a little bit for you on the third one, yeah. And so we are going to talk about a system with subsidized warranty with low premium. We are talking about this French fund, but the Turkish RSM is something very close. The the system existing in Netherlands, Paul told us that that was not so different compared to the French one. The RGO-RMF also, and EGRIF, which was a tentative fund studied by EGEC a few years ago regarding only the geothermal electricity. And we'll go after with Nicole on the Swiss example, which is more close to pure grant. So if we go to the next slide. So in France, the system was put in place, okay, in the 80s. So we are talking about 40 years of fund, and we have two sections for this. And the short-term risk, which is based on the socialization of risk and guarantee of the wells drill result. So we are talking about 2 wells if there is a doublet, production and injection one, or covering maybe more if we are talking about a triplet or a quadruplet. And afterward, on the second time, the people having subscribed to the short-term risk can subscribe to a long-term risk, which is covering the life duration, the first part of the life duration of the project, and it's applying for a 15 years period. If we go to the next slide, we can see regarding the short-term insurance mechanism that what we are going to look at. We are going to look at mainly at the ratio flow rate versus temperature, and you can see on the right picture that we are defining with that a total success zone when the flow rate and the temperature are okay, and the total failure zone below it is impossible to exploit the doublet in normal economic conditions, I would say. And okay, we have a partial success zone which are in between. And in that case, it's a long discussion to see if it is possible to make it economical or not. If we go to the next one, what are the subscription? We have a technical committee who accept the project after a detailed expertise. We have a payment of a premium in between 3 to 5%, depending on the zone. If it is a very well-known zone, like in the Dogger, like the Dogger and the Paris area, we are talking about. You see the cost for a 10 million euro project. The cost of the insurance is about 350 euro. And in that case, in case of full failure, we have a maximum compensation which reach 65% of the eligible cost. And in Ile-de-France region, the regional authority are giving 25% additionally. So, on my opinion, that was the most important thing for the promotion of geothermal energy in Ile-de-France, because you see that in the case you have a full failure, you are reimbursed at 90% of your investment. So it's very important. In the other region, it's a little bit different. It's a case-by-case discussion in between the developer, the municipality, and the regional authority to see how many percentage are going to give up to 65%. If we go to the next. So we have just a result of the short-term risk system from 80 to 10, and don't look at the right part, but on the left part, we can see that during the 30 years of the fund, at the end we are talking about big money, because 1.3 billion euro were guaranteed, And what is very important, in my opinion, discussing with the authorities in all the countries is to look at the leverage effect of €1 of public money given by the government, which represent €42 of investment. So it's a very, very, very strong leverage effect. And you see on the right that if you go to the total expenses of the fund and the total resource of the funds, we are not talking about a huge quantity of money. So it's under 10 million euro for this period. If we go to the next. On the long term, I will go quick on the long term. We can focus just on the right part, and you see what are the things covered by the fund. So we are talking clearly about the geothermal loop, the 2 wells, production injection, and also I would say all the equipment to produce, maybe talking about the pumping equipment, the heat exchanger, etc. All the geothermal loop, including the surface equipment. And in that case, you see that the annual fee for a doublet, it is very small. We are talking about 15 euro per year, which is not so huge. And you see under that the level of compensation is depending on the geothermal doublet production decrease. If it is a total damage, okay, it's a big money to come back. It is only a partial damage. There is a compensation which is calculated according to the plant lifetime and the contract references. If we go to the next, Philippe. So we have the same picture compared to the short term regarding the long term, and you see the result from 80s to 2015. So we are talking about a little bit more of money. We are talking about 35 years of fund. We are talking about 1.7 billion investment covered. And here again, and I am sure that that's the main point, you see that the money given by the government, we are again talking about, if you go on the upper part of the table on the right, we have an amount paid by the government less than 10 million euro, and you see that the leverage effect of €1 of public money is of 30 euro compared to the investment guaranteed during 15 years. Donc again, on my opinion, that the main selling good argument for the governmental authority. If we go to the next, Philippe. So you see the operating things regarding the fund. So in the middle you have SAF, which is the name of the fund, SAF Environnement. You see that there is on the bottom some expert to look at the project, and the expert to do that is the BRGM, which is a French geological survey. On the top of the picture, you see that there is also a technical committee. This technical committee is made of, for sure, BRGM, but developers, ADEME, the body in charge of renewable in France, the bank administrating the fund, and also the administrative people in charge of the mining code. So it's really working well, and it's working like that since 40 years now without any big trouble, I would say, with a strong consensus in this technical committee giving the guarantee. So if we go to the next. So you see some result consolidated for nearly 40 years. So you see that on the left, if we are talking about operation in the Paris Basin with very low risk area, you see that we have got 78% fully successful, 18% partial success, and only 4% with total failure. And if we are looking at France, where in some places the geological condition and hydrogeological conditions are not so well known, and you see that in that case the risk is higher, and we are going here to 25% of failures. And if we look at the number on the right, at the number of geothermal projects drilled during this long period, you see that at the beginning there were a big start that was completely stopped during 15 years due to the very low reference cost of fossil fuels. And we have this restart on 2005, I would say. And with a new fund, we refund this fund. But you see also, I put new heat funds supporting geothermal. Here we are not talking about a risk mitigation system. We are talking about subsidies given by the government also to promote geothermal energy. And I would say that RMS system is necessary to develop geothermal, but without a small additional help regarding the funding of the plant, it's very difficult to restart. And you see that the curve of the restart is very nice. I would say it's more or less comparable with Netherlands, so that proves that with these two types of tools, it's really possible to quickly and strongly develop the plant. And the next, Philippe. So we reinitialized those two RMS, the short-term and long-term, in 2008. And you can see the different pillars on the right. So you see that in that case, the subsidies from the French government and from Île-de-France region are at about 10.3 million euro. You see that the money given by the developers to pay the fees is 7.4, and the financial product of the money given by the government 0.8 million euros. So you see that it's not a full 50% public-private partnership, but it's not so far. And you see again that to mount such a fund for a country like France, we don't need 1,000 of million. Talking about 20 million for a fund, it's something already allowing to make a lot. And to summarize, so you see at the bottom that at the moment we have 31 short-term contracts signed. So that which impressive in 12 years, and only at the moment 15 long-term contracts, and now it's signed for 20 years. Not only for 15 years like before. And maybe the next or the last, Philippe, I don't remember. And that's the end of my presentation.
Thank you, Christian, for presenting the French scheme. And now I give the floor to Nicole Lupi to report about Switzerland, and I make you presenter. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Philippe. Is that working, or do you see my screen? Can you please confirm?
We can see your screen, but in a reading mode, not in a full screen mode.
Is that okay?
Is it perfect?
No. Good, thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Nicole Lupi. I'm working for the Swiss Federal Office of Energy, and now I bring you to Switzerland to have an overview of our risk mitigation schemes. Switzerland is part of the GEORISK consortium, and earlier in the project we were looking at framework conditions for establishing a geothermal risk mitigation scheme. So it's kind of a high-level approach. And basically, we analyzed some existing schemes and we defined 5 key aspects of, if you wish, it's 5 questions one needs to ask himself or herself to define a new risk mitigation schemes. So what I would like to do today is to present you the Swiss mitigation schemes through those 5 lenses, if you wish. You find more details in the report on the GEORISK website. So first key aspect is what are the risks covered in Switzerland. So if I had to make a list of all the barriers that was standing in the way of geothermal energy development in Switzerland, on the top of that list would be geological risks. We do not have a long history of oil and gas exploration. As you can see on the right-hand side of the slide, this is the map of Switzerland with the wells deeper than 500 meters. So there are not so many of them. And on top of this, the red points corresponds to wells where the data is not freely available. So basically, we have very little knowledge about our subsurface, and especially the deep surface. So this is not possible for project developers to go ahead and drill and find an adequate resource. Quite obviously, like in any other countries, we have another kind of risk, which is the usual financial risk or social acceptance, even though in Switzerland, I would like to highlight that this is just with regard to one technology in one little corner of Switzerland, but quite loud corner of Switzerland. So we also have legal and regulatory framework conditions that are a bit special. Being a federal state, we have 26 cantons, and they are the owners of the subsurface and the resources. So there's 26 ways of delivering a permit or of doing regulatory oversight. So that also brings a little bit of uncertainty. But the Swiss risk mitigation schemes do not cover all these risks, and we only focus on the geological risk. In brackets, you have the reference to the risk register presented by Thomas Le Guénin at the very beginning of this webinar. So you know which risk we're talking about here in Switzerland. So geological risk is the target of our risk mitigation schemes, but we also focus only on a short-term geological risk. These are the ones that the project developer have to face in the early phases of the development of a geothermal project, which is which are the phases highlighted here in green. So during prospection and exploration and subsurface development, we do not have risk mitigation schemes for the later stages of production for the moment. So we're only focusing on these early phases. And there's no commercial solutions, no entities, private entities to which transfer these risks in Switzerland. And on top of this, developing knowledge and developing a renewable energy is seen as a common good. So this is why the Swiss risk mitigation schemes are public schemes. They are supported by public institutions. So these were the first key aspect is the risk. Moving on to the legal and regulatory framework, I will not bore you with the whole history of how Switzerland come up with the legal conditions for geothermal energy. Just wanted to highlight a few points, and mainly that bit in the middle of my slides, which are all the motions that parliamentarians have brought to Parliament, and these were open discussion that I think was very important to have while developing a risk mitigation scheme. So what are we going to do? How are we going to do? How much is that going to cost? Who is going to execute that? Is that the federal government or the canton? Is that the public sector? What is our position about hydraulic stimulation, induced seismicity management? Who takes care of that? So these were very meaningful discussion. They took time, so they spread from 2011 to 2013, but I think it was important for us to have them. Fast forward to 2017, and that's another specialty of Switzerland. At the end of the day, Switzerland is a direct democracy, so the population decide what we are doing. So we have all these public institutions having the conversation about geothermal energy, and during the referendum that was held on the 21st of May 2017, the Swiss population decided with a solid 58% to move forward with our energy strategy 2050 included geothermal energy. So from that important milestone, we could bring concrete solutions, and that's how our legal framework came into force on the 1st January 2018. We do not have Geothermal Act. Instead, we have two different acts. We have the Energy Act, which governs the Swiss risk mitigation scheme for power production, and we have the CO2 Act, which governs the risk mitigation schemes for direct use of geothermal energy for heat productions. So it's a bit it's a bit difficult sometimes to consider that there are two different legal frameworks, but that's the case in Switzerland. So the act are kind of giving the essence of what we are trying to do, reduce the CO2 emission for one side, and promote geothermal energy for power production on the other side. And the ordinances, or just second level of legal text, are actually giving you how we are going to do that, the details of the procedures. Please also remember that the 26 cantons are responsible for the permitting and the regulatory oversight. So that gives you the big overview of our legal and regulatory conditions in Switzerland. Third aspect one needs to consider is how are these schemes going to be funded? Where is the money going to come from? So because we have two legal frameworks, we also have two sources of funding. The first one for the geothermal power project come from the high voltage transmission grid surcharge. So there's a surcharge on any electron going through the high voltage grid. That brings us about 1 billion francs per year. So that's about the equivalent, 1 franc is the equivalent to $1 US, or about the equivalent of €1. So we have 1 billion for all renewable energy. So what do we have for geothermal energy? We have a tiny little bit we have 50 million francs per year to support two types of schemes. So first we have the geothermal guarantee, which is the historical scheme that has been implemented in Switzerland since the 1990s, and that was upgraded on the 1st January 2018 to cover up to 60% of any subsurface development cost. This scheme is this guarantee is only paid if there's a total or partial failure of the project. New in 2018 was the exploration subsidy. That is divided into two subsidies, the surface exploration subsidy and the exploration drilling subsidy, that both cover up to 60% of the eligible cost defined in the ordinance. So these subsidies are paid along the realization and the execution of the project. So from the project developer point of view, it's a more comfortable situation. So for these two types of schemes, we have 50 million francs per year. On top of this, there's a feed-in tariff, but I think it's very realistic to say that no new geothermal project will benefit from it because it will end in 2024. The federal administration is working at the moment in finding a post-feed-in tariff solution. So that's what the situation is for power project, and these 50 million are going to run until 2031. With regard to the direct use of geothermal energy for heat production, so here we are in the CO2 Act, and there's a building program that has about a budget of about 450 million francs per year, coming from a CO2 tax on heating fossil fuel. So the aim here is to reduce CO2 emission of the building sector, and of course, geothermal energy can contribute. So from these 450 million, again, we have a little bit for geothermal development. We have about 30 million francs per year. Here it's only for direct use geothermal, and this is completely new, that there was no risk mitigation schemes for heat projects before 2018. So we only have exploration subsidies. There's no guarantee and no feed-in tariff here, but it works exactly as for power project. We have a maximum of 60% of the eligible cost for two types of subsidy, a surface exploration or subsurface development subsidies. So that will cover, for example, up to 60% of your doublet. Initially, it was supposed to run until 2025, but that was creating a bit of political uncertainty, regulatory uncertainty for the project developers. So during the actual ongoing revision of the CO2 Act, it's very likely that this is going to be extended until 2031. So it would match what we have for power production. The management of this budget is a bit different to the budget for the power project, because whatever money that is not used for geothermal is going back to a bigger pot, being distributed back to the population. So they are really two different management of the funding and two different sources. Next is the procedural aspect. How are the subsidies granted? And I think what we've been trying to do here is to keep it simple. So it's the same procedure for power, for requests for power project subsidies or heat project subsidies. So I'm not going to detail this. Just a few points I would like to highlight is that we are calling on the expertise of an external group of experts, external from the federal administration, but also external from Switzerland. So we have no conflict of interest. The Swiss Geological Survey is always sitting in this committee because they have then a big overview of all the project and all the data coming from those projects, because that's the main point. Is at the end of the project we will get all the geodata that has been collected during the realization of the project, and we will publish this data. So that's how we are hoping that at the end of the day all these measures will increase our knowledge of the surface and reduce the geological risk. The next point is it working? How is our risk mitigation schemes performing? Well, they are still young. It's only from 2018, but we've seen a tremendous growth in the interest of geothermal energy, in particular in the heat sector. So one of the performance indicator could be how much money we invested. So that's a total of about 120 million francs so far. Another indicator is the number of projects. We have more projects asking for subsidies in the heat sector than in the power sector. Having said that, it's slowly coming. So yes, I would say that there is a boom, there's a lot of interest. We are just at the beginning. This interest has been definitely the subsidies are helping, but there's another point I would like to raise is the legal and regulatory framework at the level of the canton. So they are setting the rules for the permit, and more of these cantons are working on clear procedures for permitting. So that definitely helps. So we are moving forward. And to conclude for the risk mitigation scheme in Switzerland, as I said, we are just at the beginning. There's still a lot of work to do. One, to improve our risk mitigation schemes, the procedures. So there's a constant QC and QA work ongoing at the moment. And also we have revisions of our legal framework, being the Energy Act with, as I mentioned, we are working on the post-FIDEN tariff. So there will be most likely a subsidy for the power plant construction, and also in the CO2 Act, where we are actually working on changing the management of the budget and the fund. So there's a lot of things going on, and I could not agree more with the executive director of IGA when she said that this decade is going to be the geothermal decade, and that we need to change the narrative about geothermal energy. You might have sadly seen Switzerland in the newspapers recently, so I think we need to improve a little bit our communication about geothermal energy. So that was it from me from Switzerland. I'd be happy to take your question now or later.
Thank you very much, Nicole. We'll see if we have time for a Q&A session because we still have a really interesting presentation. Now we want to do a tour d'Europe for different countries looking at the situation. First with Poland. So let's look at Beata. The floor is yours to present the situation in Poland.
Please show my PPTs, Philip.
I can show, if you prefer, I can share your screen and the floor is yours.
So please.
Yeah, so you can start to speak.
Okay, thank you very much. Good afternoon to everybody, to the participants and to all organizers. It's a pleasure to take part in this seminar. Poland, together with Greece and Hungary, is among the GEORISK target countries. So the countries for which the GEORISK project has been focusing in terms of introducing the proper risk mitigation schemes. Next slide, please. And we have prospective geothermal resources, especially for heating, but so far we have only 6 geothermal district heating systems opened between 1993 and 2013, so long years ago. Then, since 2014, there was no new geothermal district heating system constructed. So for 5 years by now, because no public support was available and very limited other funding opportunities. But good news comes from recent years between 2016 and 19, and also last week of April, there were introduced 3 really big state support programs to enhance geothermal uses, mostly in existing district heating systems. They offer grants for municipalities and some loans also for other type of investors. Total allocation for these programs, as you may see on the bottom of the table, is about 2 billion Polish zlotys. This is quite huge amount of money, equal to about 500 million euros, to spend them by 2023 or 25, depending on the program. Next slide, please. And what are some so far results of these programs? In a very brief message, at least 17 research wells were already drilled or are in progress. If positive, these wells will be transformed as production ones. Moreover, there are about 50 drilling projects done in recent years, including 5 wells which receive already public support. The rest was rejected by some may apply again. As a result, in the near future, we may expect at least about 10 new district heating systems with some geothermal input. This is quite moderate expectation. So it is clear that these big state support programs are essential to boost geothermal activities oriented for district heating and also cogeneration in some cases. However, even if public support programs are planned by 2025 or maybe beyond this date, we have to work already on the risk insurance fund as a next support and risk mitigation scheme in line with the geothermal market development. And such a fund is already needed now for those 6 plants, say all plants that have been operating for many years and require it for several reasons. Next slide, please. This is the graph, more or less similar as was presented by Ferit a couple of minutes ago. And as one may see, this graph, 6 all plants represent the stage of geothermal market in transition, for which public insurance fund is a proper tool to support, while expected heating systems, at least then, on the left-hand side, will form a juvenile stage of the market. But of course, gradually, they will also tend towards market in transition and will require the tools other than grants and even different types of loans. Moreover, what must be pointed out that introducing the risk insurance fund is important also for the operators and investors other than municipalities, so eligible for this 100% grants. They have been calling for such a measure for a long time. So this is not the first project in which we are participating with the aim to introduce such kind of insurance fund in our country. Next slide, please. And what we have done so far in this respect, thanks to the GEORISK project. First of all, it was elaborated the first proposal to establish the risk insurance fund for geothermal energy-oriented project in Poland, following proven cases, for example, from France, with cooperation with BERZEK, GEORISK expert, and also making usage of former proposal. Cooperation with key geothermal stakeholders, both domestic and international. What is the key essential to be successful in our effort is to contact, involve, and update decision makers on project work and proposals to establish the fund, finally, in our country. In this respect, we have a good situation because of a positive approach and steps to define the financial sources to establish the fund. Here we are in contact with the Minister of Environment. Now the main player is the Minister of Climate, also the National Fund for Environmental Protection and Water Management, which is the main operator of the supportive funds for geothermal in our country, Minister of Energy, now the Ministry for State Assets. And what is necessary to point out that one shall take examples, good examples from the countries with an extensive and proper experience in operating risk insurance funds, as was presented already here by Christiane for France and by Nicole for Swiss, but also from other countries. And the countries where works to establish them are well advanced. This is, for example, the case of Hungary, which will be the next speaker here, presenting the progress and very good cooperation with the Hungarian government to establish such a fund. So we would like to follow these best cases examples. Thank you very much, and this is everything from our side.
Thank you very much, Berta, for this precise and concise presentation. We continue our tour d'oeuvre, and now I will give the floor to Attila for reporting about Hungary. Attila, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Could you show my 2 slides, please? Well, my name is Attila Kujbus from Budapest, from Geothermal Express, and in Hungary, the deep geothermal sector is very traditional, almost 100 years old, and the risk mitigation scheme is missing very much. Therefore, last year, when the members of the sector was informed that this project has been started, the interest was very high, and we invited 40 professionals for the first project national workshop in Budapest last June, when we presented the GEORISK project and tried to strengthening the engagement of the stakeholders. I think it was successful because the interesting is very large so far as well. And we presented the existing schemes from France, Netherlands, Germany, Switzerland, and Turkey. And we discussed the main issues of the establishment of the first national risk mitigation scheme. Then we analyzed the results of this workshop, and we organized a workshop in November with only 12 key professionals. They were the stakeholders who are the decision makers and the persons who can support our work the best. In this second workshop, our aim was to present them the results of the GEORISK project so far, and already discussing the premises of the planned Hungarian scheme. You can see the table about the 8 subjects that was discussed. And they filled this questionnaire to be presented here. The last column is their votes that they can recommend to us. Naturally, we analyzed these questionnaires as well. The next slide, please. And we prepared a new questionnaire already about the direct subjects that are the most important in the establishment of the first scheme in Hungary. The related ministry during last year decided to establish this scheme, and we hope that this scheme will be established the next year, the latest, end of this year or early next year. And our task is to discuss with the key stakeholders with following national forum and national workshop, these 8 key subjects to provide recommendations for the ministry, because it is our main objective. So in the near future, we will continuing the national forums, which are the discussions by phone, nowadays mainly by phone. Later, we hope by personal discussions, and we will organize minimum 2 further national workshops, and we hope that we can support the related ministry to establish the first Hungarian risk mitigation scheme. That's all from Hungary now.
Thank you, Attila, for opening with Hungary. So you understand we move from Poland to Hungary, and now we go even further to the south, and we give the floor to Chanir to report about Turkey. Chanir, you are self-muted, and after the floor is yours.
Thank you, Philip. Can you also open the slides for Turkey? Good afternoon, dear participants. I am Canur Bozkurt, consultant representing GESTAR here. GESTAR is the Geothermal Power Plant Investors Association, founded in 2014 to discuss challenges of power generation market, create solutions. Next slide, please. And create solutions, assist and collaborate with decision makers for a sustainable electricity generation from geothermal resources. The association has 21 members, where 16 of them has geothermal electricity power plants, and 5 of the members has GPPs either under planning or construction. Next slide, please. The first geothermal power plant in Turkey was established in 1984 with 15 megawatt capacity. By having the geothermal law in force early 2007 to liberalize power generation market, private sector involvement has accelerated the growth. And today, the installed capacity of the country is over 1.5 gigawatt, and this has taken Turkey to the 4th line on worldwide ranking of installed capacity list. Future plans was to add like 120 megawatts by the end of this year. However, due to COVID-19 issues, some delays are expected on the completion of the projects. Next slide, please. From GEORISK project point of view, if we look at the strengths of Turkish market, we can see the significant effect of the growth that comes from government support scheme and incentives provided to the market. On the other hand, lack of financial support during exploration phase and lack of insurance systems are the barriers that are holding back the acceleration of development. This is not only for power projects, but also for direct use applications. Next slide, please. Back to early 2000s, one of the support provided by government was sharing exploration risk by having wells drilled by MTA, which is the General Directorate of Mineral Research and Exploration, a state company. The discovered fields by MTA were farmed out to investors to the private market. Another support was providing 85% discount to use land under the ownership of the Treasury Ministry, and the following one is providing priority on connecting to the national grid for power generation. Next slide, please. One of the alternative attractive supports is the tax incentives. Effective at the beginning of 2012, both local and foreign investors had access to general, regional, and strategic investment incentive schemes, which are exemption from custom duties on equipment imports, VAT exemption for imported or domestically purchased machinery and equipment, and exemption from withholding tax on documents and transactions. Next slide, please. Through mentioned liberalization period, a need of determination of incentive mechanism was emerged in order to increase the efficiency of the private sector in electricity generation. In May 2005, law on utilization of renewable energy sources for the purpose of generating electrical energy came in force and has defined the most effective support scheme called GEORISK. However, investors did not show any interest to join mechanism since the tariff was underbalancing market values. In July 2011, GEORISK was updated and revised mechanism introduced a sector-specific incentive scheme independent from the spot market values, which is, as you can see, 10.5 US dollar cents and is valid for the 10 years following the approval of the involvement to the support mechanism called GEORISK. Next slide, please. The mechanism was also providing another value incentive if the power plant uses domestically produced goods such as turbines, generators, and compressors. This additional incentive is valid for 5 years, again following the approval of the involvement of GEORISK. However, this year is the last year of this most effective mechanism in Turkey, and government has announced of a following supporting scheme, which is work in progress, and we are expecting an announcement before the year ends, or let's say late last quarter of 2020. Next slide, please. Besides government support and incentive schemes, World Bank also presented a risk-sharing mechanism. RSM aimed to promote private sector development of renewable geothermal energy projects in the early stages of geothermal exploration drilling by sharing the risk of geothermal developed failing to validate a geothermal resource. RSM has two components, where first one is the risk-sharing mechanism itself for the resource validation, and financement is being provided from Clean Technology Fund for this component. And the second one is a loan facility to provide private sector geothermal developers and supported by Turkish development banks and local banks. Next slide, please. RSM focused on an unexplored areas to encourage exploration studies by sharing resource discovery risk. That's why two kinds of share is defined within the mechanism, which is first one is 60% coverage for virgin areas and 40% for the areas where resource is already under development and discovered. Next slide, please. Direct use applications for geothermal resource has also a significant installed capacity, which is over 3,000 megawatt tons in Turkey. But unfortunately, direct use applications could not have attractive support mechanism, and its growth rate is far behind power generation. On the other hand, no matter it's limited, some supports can be listed as the establishment of greenhouse specialized organized industrial zones based on geothermal source agriculture, grants provided by Ministry of Agriculture and Forestry, up to 1 million per project, discounts to use land under the ownership of the Treasury Ministry, and postponed or shifted credit payback opportunity provided by the state banks. Next slide, please. Within the frame of GEORISK project, national and international workshops are performed in Turkey, and feedback of stakeholders are received. The prominent expectations of the market can be highlighted as the establishing an insurance mechanism, a support mechanism on capacity development of current operating power plants, and an incentive scheme for cascade systems to integrate direct use applications, and of course the new supporting mechanism which will accelerate the market as much as YEKTEM. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chania. And now we give the floor to Spiros Karitsas from Greece to report about Greece. Spiros, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. I am Spiros Karitsas from Athens, Greece, from the Center of Renewable Energy Sources and Saving. And I will present to you the case of Greece in the context of the GEORISK project. Okay, next slide, please, Philippe. Okay, thank you. In Greece, there is a recognizable geothermal potential. There are more than 50 recognized geothermal fields throughout Greece. Most of them are located in northern Greece and in the Aegean Sea, in the islands. There are fields with low temperatures, others with high temperatures. However, in Greece, until now, we utilize geothermal energy only on direct uses, mainly greenhouse heating and balneology applications. There is no power production in Greece, although we have the resources for something like that. Next slide, please. Okay. There is a potential for future developments. Here we have listed some of the future developments that are either under development or under investigation for both power production, mainly in the Aegean Sea region, or for district heating in northern Greece, where someone can find the geothermal fields with lower temperatures. Next slide, please. Now, in the context of GEORISK, about 1 year ago, in June 2019, we had a workshop concerning the assessment of potential risks in Greece, and in combination with the questionnaire which was developed within Work Package 2, we had an assessment of the risks in Greece. We could recognize that the main risks in Greece have to do mainly with social and economic factors. For example, social acceptance issues, lack of clients, or lack of further capital investments. On the other side, the operational and geological risks have a medium are of medium degree, and drilling risks are even lower, have minimal relevance or medium relevance for the case of Greece. Next slide, please. Now, concerning risk mitigation, in Greece, there is no specific risk mitigation scheme for geothermal projects. However, there are some activities that can assist the mitigation of risk concerning these projects. For example, first of all, the geological and mineral exploration survey of Greece has been performing and has performed in the past exploration activities throughout the geothermal fields in Greece. Thus, this means that through public funding, there is a lot of data available, and the exploration and geological risks are reduced for potential investors. In addition, municipalities using funds from the National Strategic Reference Framework have developed infrastructure for district heating networks, meaning that some costs that are related to lack of funding for future or potential investors are also reduced. Next slide, please. Here we can see the results from the questionnaire that we had around 2 months ago. It is the same. It is the questionnaire that was developed from our partner from Hungary, a little bit modified in order to relate to the case of Greece. Some of the main findings of this questionnaire concerning the establishment of an RMS geothermal for geothermal projects is that the experts responded that the scheme should be sponsored either by public and private partnerships or by international finance resources. The risks covered should focus mainly on exploration and development, but here we can see that there are a lot of different opinions regarding the risks covered. Concerning the geological scope, most of the experts agree that all possible formations should be covered, and perhaps the most important finding here is that concerning the type of the scheme, most experts believe that for the maturity of the Greek market, a refundable grant should be proposed, followed by a convertible grant or a simple grant. A very small part of the experts focused on a pure insurance scheme. Next slide, please. Okay, within our works for the GEORISK project and the establishment of a geothermal RMS, we identified the legislation and policies that could be utilized to do something like that. For example, we have a new law established in 2019, which allows the government to establish incentive schemes for the support of geothermal development without, however, specifying the type of schemes. This law, this article could be utilized in order to proceed with the establishment of the RMS in Greece. Next slide, please. Apart from the apart from the laws presented before, we have also some policies that could be utilized. For example, again in 2019, we had the National Energy and Climate Plan. In section 532, it refers to risk factors and challenges. Again, it is something that could be utilized also within the context of GEORISK project in order to establish a mitigation scheme for Greece. Next slide, please. Okay, so our next steps within GEORISK is to meet with stakeholders, to communicate with them, to exchange our opinions. In the near future, we will have 2 more workshops in Greece, again, to inform the stakeholders, to communicate with experts, and using all this information collected to develop an RMS proposal for geothermal energy in Greece. Right now, in the Ministry of Environment and Energy, there is a committee for the geothermal law that was established last year, and within the activities of this committee, there could be planning or scheduling for the establishment of the RMS scheme in Greece. So that's all from me for Greece. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Spiros, also for presenting Greece. As you have seen, we are a bit late or some delay. Although it was quite a challenge for us to transform what should have been a half a day seminar in Reykjavik into a webinar, but we have rushed a little bit the agenda, and I'm sure we'll be able to finish with all the presentation, and you will have this good overview of the work we are doing. And now moving to the global overview. And to start with global overview, we have a first presentation from Virginie. So Virginie, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Philippe. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Virginie Schmidlet-Bloch. I'm working for the French Geothermal Association of Professionals. As introduction to this session, oops, can you see my slide? Next one. Yes, to this as introduction, I just wanted to remind you that GEORISK initial objectives were to decrease the uncertainty of a project development, and as a result to allow project developers to reduce their exploration and financing costs. We have seen in previous work package that public funding remained very strategic to launch any geothermal risk mitigation scheme. And this is even more true for juvenile geothermal market and markets in transition. But in the long run, we can expect this kind of risk mitigation scheme to be temporary and become more and more attractive to private financing. And the idea of GEORISK was also to extend our analysis to more countries with the objective to improve market conditions and to make sure that geothermal sources will be used in an optimal way. It is clear that the establishment of an appropriate insurance schemes belong to this condition sine qua non. One of the first work achieved in GEORISK was the realization of a benchmark study summarizing the existing national and regional funds in Europe and worldwide. Among the 21 major schemes inventoried, 7 are terminated and sometimes prove not efficient. 12 are ongoing at world level and 3 are under proposition. We have EGRIF in Europe, GeoFuture in Africa, and also GeoDeep in France mainland that will be devoted to EGS projects. For your information, this deliverable should be soon available for you in open access. As a result, we have also identified different levels of success that have been observed in these 21 funds assessed. And we have also determined important criteria for the establishment of this type of risk mitigation scheme. As Nicole Lupi has already presented them previously, I won't detail them anymore. And I will start this new session of our webinar with the presentation of our 4 targeted countries that have been more precisely analyzed in the work package 5. I will start with Chile, whose geothermal resources are estimated at 3,800 megawatts. Chile is already dotted with a fund called MERIC that was first financed by the World Bank, the Clean Technology Fund, with 53 million US dollar in 2013-2014. MERIG is providing a service concession and loan rebate to fund in both success and failure cases. But we have to say that MERIG fund proved to be inefficient, notably because of the competition with other renewable energy, solar, wind, hydro. And the fact is that geothermal energy resources are far from the grid and as many located in the Andean mountains. So with GEORISK project, we will be more a support to find other market opportunities. And I won't go more into details as a dedicated presentation on Chilean geothermal market will just follow right now in session 3. Regarding Mexico, the country is also already endowed with a risk mitigation scheme, which is structured in a traditional way. This fund is based on subsidized refundable advances with low and partial repayments to the fund in case of success. As you can see on the screen, the procedures of the fund are relatively complex and involve many entities. That's why we said GEORISK could provide some simplification to this kind of mitigation schemes. And presentation of our project were expected in Bogota for the GeoLag conference, as Phil already said, that has been postponed to September 2020. But at the time, there is still high uncertainty on the possibility we can take part to this event. Next, I will come to Canada, that remains the only major country of the Pacific Rim that is not producing electricity from its geothermal resources. Also, there are high objectives for changing the energy mix. We have chosen Canada because the country at the moment has no risk mitigation scheme. And that's why we try to introduce discussion and structure coordination with the regional government, the Canadian Geothermal Association, and district heating developers. And to finish with Kenya, of course, it is an very interesting country for its geothermal development. With 750 megawatts, Kenya ranks in the 8th position worldwide for its geothermal installed capacity. It is also, of course, a good case study because the country is already covered by the GRMF that has already attracted many applicants and awarded many support. Yet we can say that whole money has not been cashed out and connection of plants to the grid are still expected. For this reason, GEORISK project is expecting to promote complementary measures and acceleration of the process. We have precisely received the previous day a notification about the kickoff meeting for the 6th application round of the geothermal of the GRMF that will be held on the 6th of May, and GEORISK partner will take part to this meeting. And we are also expecting to be present in RGO next November if the event, of course, is maintained. To finish my presentation, I just wanted to show you with the example of the Kenya country fish, how the replication measure of work package 5 have been elaborated. So let me switch to my. So for each targeted country, we have elaborated country fish. Here you can see the Kenya fishes. We always start with the same item, which is the presentation of the current deep geothermal market condition in 2019. And then we go to the main information about the operator and developers. There is also an update about energy regulations and policy. We will also have a focus on energy market condition, where we try to reuse the result shown by Ferid previously in work package 3, and all the condition transition depending on the maturity of our different markets. I just want to say that for Kenya, we are still missing some information regarding the main stakeholders, but also the key recommendation. So if I may ask that, please feel free to contribute to the finalization of the fiche if you want. And to conclude, just be aware that we would be glad to extend our scope to other countries not already studied, and of course that we can support you in the realization of your country fiche. And this is all for me at the moment. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Virginie, for this global overview. Now we have so presentation on 3 elements. So first, Eileen from the World Bank, following by Meseret from UNEP, and finally Carlos from Chile. So we start with Eileen, and the floor is yours. I'll make you presenter.
No, can you share my slides?
Up to you. What do you prefer?
I would prefer if you could share them.
Okay. So I will show your slide. So the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. So good afternoon. My name is Elín Hallgrímsdóttir, and I'm a senior energy specialist at the World Bank. And in my presentation, I will introduce 2 geothermal risk mitigation facilities. So next, please. Next slide, please. You are most likely all familiar with this figure, which shows the relationship between risk and cost in geothermal projects. Upfront risk and high capital cost has been one of the main causes for delays in geothermal developments. Several ways have been developed through the years to address this risk, and today I'm going to present 2 of the ongoing risk mitigation project that the bank is co-supporting. And I'm sorry, there will be some synergy with Kanur, and I will go very fast over those slides. The first project is the risk sharing mechanism, which is part of the Turkey geothermal development. And in 1980, the Turkey government updated their geothermal goals to 4 gigawatt, and by the end of 2030, as they had already achieved the 2023 goals. The geothermal development project is set up to enhance the geothermal production and thus play a role in achieving these targets. The project was launched in 2016 and is set to end in December 2022. The project has approximately $350 million of funding, of which 38 million have been allocated to the risk-sharing mechanism. In Indonesia, the geothermal resource mitigation facility was approved in September 2019 and is therefore in the preparation stage. The facility has more than $660 million in funding for various activities, and its aim is to increase the share of renewable energy in Indonesia energy mix, which is currently around 13%, but the government aim is to increase it to 23% in 2025. So next slide, please. The risk-sharing mechanism is part of the Turkey geothermal development, and the aim of the mechanism is to increase private sector investment in geothermal exploration drilling in Turkey by providing partial coverage of exploration wells, drilling cost in case of unsuccessful wells. The structure of the project is presented, and Kanur has already gone over that. Maybe what I would like to emphasize is that the developer and the facility will prepare a beneficiary agreement before the developer receives funding, and a group of consultants has been hired to evaluate the applications and follow the process and review results. Each round of application consists of 3 stages: the initial screening, evaluation of the viability of the resources, and further evaluation and ranking. So next slide, please. The RSM goal is to support the drilling of the first 3 wells, but it is an option to apply also for support for wells 4 and 5. The mechanism has been mentioned before, offers different risk prime depending on the location, as some areas in Turkey are more developed than others. For locations where the resource is less developed, the risk prime is 60%, but 40% for more developed location. Also, the risk prime decreases after the initial 3 wells and is 40% for wells 4 and 5, regardless of location. The developer will also pay a success fee if the drilling is successful, and the success fee is 10% for the first 3 wells, but increases to 25% for wells 4 and 5. The first round of evaluation was finalized last year, and in total 7 projects were selected. Currently, the projects are finalizing the beneficiary agreements, which includes success criteria agreement, as well as clauses regarding environmental social compliance. Each project will receive maximum $4 million. Can you go to the next slide? In order to determine if well or a project is successful, a decision tree has been developed and is presented in the slide. In Turkey, the CO2 content of the well is high, of the wells or the resource is high, and therefore additional criteria of CO2 emission is applied to determine the success or failure of wells or the project. A project is deemed unsuccessful if 2 wells out of the 3 or 5 wells drilled is unsuccessful. And I will not go into more detail, and if you want to study, you can study the decision tree further. So it was expected that the 7 projects scheduled would commence in 2020, but we will need to see the effect that the COVID-19 has on the time schedules. So if you can go to the next slide. And then the Indonesia Geothermal Resource Mitigation Facility started last year. The facility is planned for 10 years period to accommodate for the long lead time of the geothermal project. The work funding does not only apply to exploration risks, but also to technical assistance to mitigate, for example, regulatory risk in the medium and long term. The facility is both open for public and private developers, and it is envisioned that 2/3 of the projects will be private PPPs. The rules for funding differs between private and public developers, and I will briefly demonstrate the difference in the next slides. So next slide, please. A private developer is required to commit a sponsor fund or equity equivalent to 25% of the total cost of the explorational drilling. The facility then covers 100% of the exploration drilling cost by providing a 50% sub-loan and a 50% loan linked to the market value of the shares through a financial instrument. For the delineation drilling, 100% of the cost is covered by loan. Each developer can maximum get $30 million in support. Next slide, please. If the exploration is successful, the developer pays the amount fully back with success premium 130% after 4 years, but for unsuccessful exploration, the financial instrument is not repaid. But when the exploration is partly successful, the repayment is based on the developer fair market value, which is agreed upfront with the developer. However, the 50% financed in loans will be repaid regardless of success. So next slide, please. For public developers, the facility will fund 75 to 95% of the exploration drilling cost, half in soft loans and half as IBRD loan. The government of Indonesia can, for unsuccessful exploration, decide to provide 50% as a grant, but for successful exploration, the government will not provide grant support. And next, please. By 2030, investing 460 to 840 million, the facility is expected to leverage an additional $4 billion in investment, at 1 gigawatt of new geothermal capacity, and avoid 5 million tons of CO2 emission per year in Indonesia. Beyond these figures, the facility would pilot a scalable approach to mitigating resource risk and engaging the private sector for geothermal development. So if more concessional funding can be mobilized, these results can be scaled up accordingly. We believe these facilities can serve as a testbed for similar engagement worldwide, thus contribute to meeting the clean energy target under the Sustainable Development Goals. And then the final slide. But I would also like to add that even though these risk mitigation, which I have presented here, are focusing on electricity, in the next business plan for the SMAP, the focus will be more on direct use. So, thank you very much.
Thank you, Eileen, for this presentation about the instrument from the World Bank. If you have some questions, don't hesitate to ask questions. If we are able, we'll answer to them during this webinar. If not, we'll, as I mentioned, follow a follow-up to this webinar with some direct contact to you. Yes, now, please. I will give the floor to Meseret from UNEP in Kenya. Meseret, you can hear us?
Yes, give me as a presenter so I can use my...
Of course, and so the floor is yours.
Yeah, so can you see my presentation?
I confirm.
Yeah. Thank you very much. And I really thank Philip and his organization for inviting UNEP to share about the geothermal outlook and the risk mitigation facility in East African countries. In Africa, as you know, we have a lot of geothermal power, both for power generation and direct use application. And mostly we have a number of African countries that possesses this geothermal resource, but mostly we are focusing on the East African rift system that really have a high enthalpy geothermal systems, and in the eastern branch of this area where they have both different kinds of resource risk. And as you see here, actually, most of the people I have heard that talking about Kenya and also maybe Ethiopia and others, you know, we have in the East Africa rift system where we have the eastern branch and where possesses a high temperature geothermal systems, but we have also at the western branch a number of countries that really have low to medium temperature systems, and due to technology and others, they can really use it for both power generation and also direct use application. I'm very happy to hear now from earlier presenter from SMAP now, there will be a risk mitigation facility for direct use, which is really significant for even Africa that really contribute to the sustainable development. So the potential we have, I think, is huge, enormous, and more than 20 gigawatt in the whole East African rift system. But currently we have only Kenya and Ethiopia, and Kenya, I've heard from earlier presenter, is now generating about 876 megawatt, and Ethiopia pilot plant. But other countries are at various stages, but we have also in the North African countries mostly used for direct use application. So when we talk about now the risk mitigation facility, we'll focus on mainly on the two countries, Ethiopia and Kenya. That is where they have really developed in terms of particularly Kenya, a number of geothermal power development and starting the direct use application. And also Ethiopia having now a huge private developers there interested really to develop the geothermal resource. So that is where we really need now to introduce this risk mitigation facilities to attract this different private sectors. So you can see that now Kenya is really going ahead and steaming ahead for geothermal, where it is also a very good example for the whole region. And these are all the regions where they are really mostly accepted or received a different focus from the geothermal risk mitigation facility of the African Union Commission. And the other is Ethiopia is really coming up. Both actually they are, though have not yet developed the geothermal power plant, but we can see a huge geothermal pipelines where they will really possess a remarkable, geothermal potential and a number of private investors. And in the coming, I think, very nearly that we will have a good number of megawatts and with different risk guarantee mechanisms and other instruments. The other areas like Djibouti, Tanzania, and Uganda and others, they are at various stages of exploration and looking for different options of actually risk mechanism and financing and also capacity building. So as you see, the Africa has really now in the geothermal era, in the context of this clean energy mechanism, and also geothermal being a renewable energy, and in the Paris Agreement on action plan, climate action, they are really focusing on that. So a plan is now to really develop about 5,000 megawatt, which really requires about 20 billion, more than 20 billion investment. And Kenya is about, the major parties from Kenya and Ethiopia and Djibouti. So these are, I think, the main challenges now. We have high upfront costs, the inadequate grant support, particularly the risk mitigation for exploration drilling. Of course, I have heard from previous ones that the policy and legislation are the main difficult issue, particularly here, but where some of the countries are really opening. And we see that the commercial banks and our others are reluctant to come at the early exploration phase and also to support the low to medium temperature resources, because at the western branch of the East Africa Rift System, most of the resources we have are mostly medium temperature resources. So we need those people and those, I think, private sectors for that. So we need these resources, the capacity, actually the risk mitigation, the finance, and also the resource risk has to be gone. I think everybody's familiar with this. We got it from the World Bank Handbook. The main challenge we have is now here, where we need both public and private sectors can really play in this role, because this is, I think, the upfront cost and the resource risk is happening here. So if you see in the region, we have different geothermal risk mitigation schemes. When I just put it like regional support programs, these are mostly, they are the ones that are really focusing on these, where they are really supporting countries, particularly the public entity, by providing support to really identify the resources and mitigate the risk of resource exploration to attract investment. This is example, the RGO, the GRMF, and also the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Iceland International Development Agency. These are all the different programs that are really attracting investment. And on the other hand, we have different investment and development banks where they give to both public and private developers actually loans and others to attract investment. So basically, as you see here, these are the development phase which we have seen. What we are trying to do is we have now, we'll just speak a little bit on the, basically on the geothermal risk mitigation facility. It's unfortunate that we don't have the representative from African Union Commission who can really tell us more about it, but I took the liberty of now discussing more on that by just referring to some documents. So, like the RGO and others and the UNEP program, we develop a project pipelines by really taking the risk or mitigating the risk associated with resource exploration and giving to the GRMF. For example, now the one in Kenya, the Silali project, and also in Ethiopia, Tandaho, and also in Tanzania and Uganda, we just developed the UNEP program and give that is mostly a pipeline for securing the geothermal risk mitigation facility for drilling programs. So these, the ones which we saw here, are mostly just putting in terms of the policy and regulatory framework. We give advice in terms of capacity development and putting together all the geothermal related data. So we are just developing this pipeline, and the GRMF is also helping even in surface studies. So that is how now we are trying to really have a number of private developers where they got the benefit out of it. So basically, as you see, this is the RGO that we are mostly doing. So we mitigate the risk, identify the resource, and catalyze investment. Mostly working on for both direct use and power generation. We develop a conceptual model that can be make it eligible for having the African Union Commission Geothermal Risk Mitigation Facility. So this facility, I think it is a very good opportunity for the region in Africa, because it encourages both public and private investors to mobilize financing, and it focuses about 11 countries. But this risk mitigation facility is a grant for both surface exploration studies, and basically the more important of this facility is for having drilling program, because most of the surface studies is being done by other support programs. So this program has actually, you can see it has the financial support of basically for drilling grants, it will take up to 40% of the exploration drilling cost and also testing of the reservoir confirmation. That is about, I think, 3 deep wells, large size diameter. And also it covers the infrastructure grants for accessing the drilling areas. These, and also now this facility has also revised, and they also give a risk mitigation facility or a grant up to 3 slim hole wells, because most of the countries, apart now from Kenya, Ethiopia, and others, they have also, you know, medium or low temperature geothermal systems. So it is good also to encourage them to go for the slim holes to really mitigate these risks, which is a very good opportunity for countries. In addition to that, there is a continuation premium, which is about 30% of the approved costs of, it depends on the developer. So this, the African Union, it has actually covered the, out of the 11 countries, they have given about for 6 countries. You can see that Ethiopia is one of the most beneficiary of this, mostly the private developers from there, from these different areas, including Kenya, the Geothermal Development Company, which is the state-owned, and the other private developers. Most of them, they are, the drilling programs are both in Ethiopia and Kenya, most of the drilling programs. And the others, they have in Comoros, the surface study grants, where they really encourage, and they have also the drilling program, and Uganda and Tanzania as well. So these are the 6 countries, they got the benefit out of it. About 30 projects are all in all, both the surface and the drilling program. I think 16 drilling programs, most of them owned by private developers, have got the grant. And I think the, you know, the projects from Kenya, Ethiopia, and others. So there is a big investment volume for this, and it is really an eye opener for this. However, when we have this risk mitigation facility, we can say that this is only a 40% grant. So there is always a secure development's own share is a delay all the time. Particularly the public developers have a problem to really secure the share, what is expected from them. And also the delay there is in project implementation. And also most of the countries out of the 11, they have a limited or no participation of these, which is really to be encouraged. These all, I think, information, I got it from the African Union there, and I have heard that there is the 6th round application. You can get a lot of information from there, from African Union, where you can just join this on May 6th. That can be done. So all in all, just looking at this from us is there is a commitment also need from the government and also from actually for the risk mitigation facility. The challenges, the policies and regulatory framework is very, very crucial. There is, I think, a delay in the power purchase agreement and feed-in tariff and others. So that will be a bottleneck for, I think, getting even this risk mitigation or risk insurance guarantees. And a clearly defined investment tax incentives also is very important. So mostly, I think these are the issues that we have to really look at. So as a conclusion, I think the resource risk and high upfront investment is really a bottleneck for the region. I think Kenya is just steaming ahead, but most of the countries have really this challenge. And I think in this mode, the PPP is critical for the success of the projects, but the risk mitigation facility is not only limited to pre and during drilling. We have to see also for the post-drilling resource development, because it is, I think, very, very crucial. It is not only just for during the drilling, but we have to really see also during the conversion of the energy part. Appropriate risk sharing in early stage development is also a critical for success. And we are really happy to see now we have different kinds of schemes where the region is going to be beneficial. Thank you very much, Philip. Over to you.
Thank you very much from my side, Meseret, for this clear presentation, not only in Kenya, but indeed in several countries in Africa where we can really develop geothermal. And I know that you are the right person to contact for such support. So thank you, Meseret. And now we will travel around the Atlantic to go to Chile. And I give the floor to Carlos for presenting also what is between Chile and South America. So Carlos, the floor is yours. Carlos, can you hear us? We cannot hear you. We can see your slide, but we cannot hear you, although you are unmuted.
Can you hear me?
No, we can hear you. The floor is yours. Hello, I confirm.
Hello.
Yes, Carlos, I confirm we can hear you, so the floor is yours. You can speak now.
Okay, thank you. Do I have the control of the presentation, or are you going to do that?
You have a full control of the presentation. We can see your screen and you move your slide yourself.
Okay, thank you very much. So I'm presenting here under the name of GEORISK Energy. It's a consulting company founded in 2009, and I will speak very shortly on the power sector in Chile. Also, just to mention that I'm running the Spanish version of Think Geoenergy. This is the geothermal newsletter for Latin America. And the main consulting services we provide is with focus on Latin America, and we have a lot of experience doing this in Chile, Mexico, Nicaragua, Argentina, Ecuador, Peru, Colombia, basically on geothermal projects. If you go to the next slide, please.
It's you showing your screen, so it's you to move your slide.
Yes, okay, okay. So I was asked to talk very shortly in 10 minutes about the power sector. So I will do my best effort to do this very quickly. So the power sector in Chile, as a main characteristic, it is a deregulated market, and we have the existence of a spot market and the contract markets. So this is quite different from other regulations like in Europe, where you can geothermal projects and any technology can access to these financial schemes like feed-in tariff. The Ministry of Energy here in Chile is responsible for the regulation of the sector, and we have a very mature regulation for the power sector, and also in terms of the environmental framework, there is a specific regulation for geothermal projects. So in terms of the regulatory, so the main issues behind the regulation, that's already in a very good shape. And we have three main sectors: generation, the regulated market, and transmission and distribution. Both are regulated monopoles and companies that run by private companies. So the state is not involved in the business itself. It is run by private entities. And also we have an entity that is the National Oil Company named INA that got the allowance to go into the power sector as a power generator a few years ago in 2017, and is now a new player in the market. So there are some we still don't know how exactly that company will work in the market, since they, on the other hand, they do the whole imports of the fuels, and they have the control over the fuel price in the country. We have 3 refineries in the country, and 75% of the fuels are imported mainly, so gross numbers. Going into generation projects, so PPA options in Chile are mainly two that are, we have two good alternatives that are good for geothermal projects. Ones are bilateral negotiations with off-takers. Here I'm talking about mining companies and big industrial companies. You have to go and negotiate with them directly all conditions around a PPA. And then we have a second market that is the regulated sector or regulated clients. That is the supply of energy for those clients are also regulated under these monopoles, distribution market, and we have these energy auctions where you get a PPA for your project with around 20 years of energy delivery that's suitable for a geothermal project. Then we have spot market operated. You can sell energy to the spot market with a very low spot price, around $40 per megawatt hour, or you can. There is also another market based on the stabilized spot market for small renewable energy projects less than 9 megawatts, where you get a stabilized PPA that is updated every 6 months. So you don't need to negotiate with off-takers, both in the spot market and also in the stabilized spot market. That's so mainly very an overview on the Chilean market. In terms of geothermal in Chile, we have a potential estimate on 3,800 megawatts. That is based on exploration data from areas with exploration concessions. So the main question here is that the country potential is much higher than that, and there is a publication done in 2010 that where they estimate a theoretical potential at from 16,000 megawatts for the country. So there is We hope this year the country, the Ministry of Energy, will start a work trying to figure out what is the country potential, because this 3,800 megawatts is just based on some concessions areas. The main geothermal projects here are the joint venture between Enel and Green Power and INAP. They own the project Cerro Pabellón, first geothermal power plant in South America that kicked off in March 2017 with an installed capacity of 48 megawatts. Currently, they are constructing the expansion of additional 33 megawatts that should be online by next year. The Energy Development Corporation from the Philippines, they do have an office here. They are running the project Mariposa. That project is between around 100 megawatts size. Transmark Renewables Chile, filial from Holland, Transmark. They have the best project is Peumayén, also around 90 megawatts, 100 megawatts. And then those three entities marked in green in bold here are currently doing activities in Chile. And then we have other concession holders like Energía Andina, Serviland, and Infinergeo, where they have slowed down their operations, and we don't see any move on their projects, like Tingiririca project, 150 megawatt project, and from Serviland, around 60 megawatt project. In terms of the regulation for the geothermal sector, we have a geothermal law that kicked off in year 2000. It is currently under improvement, and the idea of this improvement is to split what refers to power generation, let's say high enthalpy resources, and low enthalpy applications, where the Ministry of Energy has focused on geothermal heat pumps. So currently all of the activities are run under the geothermal law, and this is a problem for smaller projects like geothermal heat pumps. We have a concessional system that is based on an exploration concession that lives for 2 years with the option to extend in 2 additional years, and then an exploitation concessions that is without limit of time, and you have to pay only an annual fee for maintaining it. What is particular for the geothermal sector is that we have 2 indigenous consultation processes. One stepping into the exploitation concession granting process, and the second one during the environmental impact assessment. This is, on one side, this is good because you have an early engagement with indigenous communities around the project and their expectations. And on the other side, it makes a little of noise because the first indigenous consultation is done when you submit applications for the exploitation concession, and that process can last for 1 or 2 years. So you after the exploration, then you have stopped your project for 1 or 2 years. That's something that can be improved. In terms of incentives for the sector, VAT exemption, custom fee exemptions are in place. Companies have the option to use accelerated depreciation in 3 years, and we have a risk mitigation fund or systems already in place in Chile. Also, MIRIC, one of them, and the other one is the GDF fund that is also with an open call these days. What are the problems behind the risk mitigation funds, MIRIC and GDF? On one side, the number of wells they recognize for the drilling exploration program does not match with the reality in Chile, so we need at least 3 or 4 wells, because just the cost for the mobilization and demobilization of the rig to Chile is almost the cost of 1 well. Failure concept also, here we are projects are located up in the mountains, so we need projects bigger than 60 megawatt to make it feasible economically. So failure concept here, companies have estimated around 6 megawatt per well, should be something to consider. And in terms of market risk, there is a high risk also that is not included on those mechanisms, meaning you can have a success technical project with very good wells, but not a suitable PPA for it. So there is also market risk that you don't know if you are going to be successful with your business at the end of the day. What is the attractiveness for geothermal? And the challenges. So the main challenge, as I mentioned earlier, is getting a suitable PPA for the project. And the question is when you negotiate this PPA, before drilling or after drilling. And this has a real impact in the negotiation process, because if you do this negotiation before the exploration drilling, then you are adding into the PPA the whole risk of failure. But if you do it after the drilling campaign, so after you finalize your exploration drilling, then you have a more certainty on your real project cost, and also you can have a better estimate on your PPA. And this is a challenge because it has been, in my opinion, is the main barrier today in Chile for geothermal projects, is getting a suitable PPA, and the question is when to negotiate. So in that sense, risk mitigation systems make a lot of sense, because you will have you will boost the company to move forward with the drilling and then start the negotiation. That's key today for the market. In terms of opportunities for geothermal, you see on the right side there is a picture of Chile, and also you see the transmission line here, 2,000, 3,000 kilometers long. We have the whole solar and generation concentrated in the northern part of the system. These gray areas shown in the map are the known geothermal areas with exploration. And so where are the challenges? So there is an explosive introduction of solar and wind. Today, with almost 20% of the capacity is solar and wind. We have an extensive drought that is expected to continue and is impacting the hydro production. So the Chilean system is a hydro system, hydrothermal system, and we are seeing that the hydro production is going down very quickly. And also the forecast for rains is very bad these days. We have also a carbon power step out program. So Chile, in agreement with the companies, are closing slowly the carbon facilities. So we see here that by 2025, 1.4 gigawatts are going to shut down, and by 2050, 5 gigawatts, meaning by this 100% of the carbon production. And the question is, how are we going to replace this carbon production? And this is an opportunity for geothermal. So in the long term, it's a 5 gigawatt opportunity, enough space for solar, concentrated solar power, solar with storage capacity, and geothermal. Then we have the transmission risk. So if Chile today is basing their strategy on supporting the solar generation coming from the north to the south, so with 1,000 kilometer distance to the main consumption areas, there is a transmission risk. We have seen in the past decoupling on marginal cost of around 40 to 60 US dollar per megawatt hour. And the question is, why not to have a distributed generation around the country like geothermal? So there is also an opportunity to for geothermal. Ancillary services is another issue that is today a very hot topic due to the introduction of solar and wind capacities. Then we have the ramp up, ramp down. Just by solar photovoltaic, by 2025, it will be around 5.2 gigawatts. We have currently 2,100 megawatts solar photovoltaic installed capacity and 2,400 under construction. So that is a challenge for a small system with a capacity of around 20 gigawatts, 25 gigawatts, when you have 25% of it going up, on and off in the morning and off during the afternoon. And we think here this is something that flexibility that geothermal can provide has a space in the market. So this is the main picture, in my opinion, for the future of the power sector here and opportunity for geothermal. Then in terms of the regulated sector, we have this energy auction. I mentioned it. We have a yearly a call for these auctions, and the Geothermal Council is working today with the authority to create a proper energy block where geothermal can compete against solar and wind. The main issue here is that solar energy can offer their energy during the solar hours. I think they don't care on the cost for the rest of the day. In terms of social license, Chile is going behind carbon neutrality by 2050. We have more educated citizens thinking the future and the sustainability of the country and the environment. So no one is willing to have more gas facilities or carbon facilities. There are challenges for the social license for gas facilities, and also there is no more space in terms of ports for importing natural gas, liquid natural gas, or from the gas pipe system we have with Argentina. And we have a step out program for carbon production. So the main message here is that there is just looking into solar photovoltaic to ramp up and down of flexibility requirements, and with the carbon step out program is another 5 gigawatt potential. And in numbers, so installed capacity is 25 gigawatts. We have three main systems. The national system accounts for 99% of this installed capacity. And then we have small systems associated to islands and to some cities located in the southern part of the country, next to the Patagonia. Peak demand from the SEN system is 10.6 gigawatt and minimum demand 7.2 gigawatts. So you see a very stable behavior on the peak and on the lowest demand for during the past year. On the graph on the right, we have 3.8 gigawatts power projects that are under construction. From those, 87% are renewables projects, and the rest are mainly diesel generation for covering the flexibility required by solar and wind units. And this 3.8 gigawatts accounts for $9 billion investment. In March 2020, we had a total production of 6 terawatt hours and a total demand of almost 5.9 terawatt hours. And the ratio between regulated demand, so from the regulated sector and the non-regulated sectors, here mining and industrial, is 40% from the demand goes to the regulated sector and 60% to the industrial sector. The marginal cost for March in average was $42.5 per megawatt hour, and the average market PPAs that are in force today in the country accounts for $87.5 megawatt hours. And here is the main challenge. So this is what the reality is. Existing PPAs are in the range of $87 per megawatt hours, marginal cost 42, and photovoltaic is offering energy for $25 megawatt hours. So that's the main challenge, how to deal with the required PPA for a geothermal project. So this is basically my presentation. Very short.
Thank you, Carlos, indeed, for this overview. And as mentioned by Virginie before, Chile is one of the target countries we're looking for. So as maybe we have not highlighted yet, we will have a specific webinar about Chile, about Kenya, about Mexico, and about Canada. We hope to have also physical events in these countries, but in case we cannot have physical events, we will do anyway a series of webinars for these countries. I thank you all for having attended this webinar. Now we are at the end of it. We were more than 100 people, or it was nearly 150 people following this webinar. We still are a bit lower than 100, so it was quite a long webinar. It was 3 hours, but as I said, it was planned as a physical event to report to you all the results of our project. I hope that you enjoy this presentation. As we say, it's not the end of our project. We still have 1 year to work on developing better instruments and engaging with different stakeholders in Europe, but also outside Europe, all over the world, in Africa and America, to deliver such risk mitigation scheme a bit everywhere. Now I'm concluding. I say, of course, the presentation will be available. There will be some information regarding when the presentation are online. As I say, we are not able to answer all the questions, but anyway, I have them. I copy them. I have your contact detail, and we will come back to you to answer your questions. I hope you enjoyed this webinar. It was a bit long, but I have a good news for you, is that you have some safe time because you don't have anymore to travel from your office to home. You are blocked in quarantine, so you are avoiding also some traffic jam. So this is the good news for that. And I hope you enjoy, and I wish you a good evening if you're in Europe, a good day for if you're in America, and a good night if you are in East Asia. Thank you all, and I wish you a good day, and I hope to see you soon. Goodbye, and stay safe.